I don't know what you even say to that. I don't
That
know what
might
to...
be the worst example of teaching that we've ever seen. And that's saying something.
English language teaching under the covers.
Hello and welcome back to ELT Under the Covers, ELT React, where we educational professionals, we look at the good, the bad and the ugly of teaching clips on the internet. Today we are going a little bit spicy, so disclaimer, we are going to be looking at some content and teaching content that might not be I don't know what the word is, kosher?
PC.
PC. But
It's PG 13.
at the very least, we are continuing with our SouthPark series, and we are going to look at Mr. Garrison and for going further down the rabbit hole and many other holes. But first, introductions. I'm Neil, a team teacher.
Hello, everybody. It's Professor Leach.
To recap, we did a previous episode with Mr. Garrison. We looked at his teaching technique, and now we're looking at, we're exploring that a little bit further, because in one or two of these clips, he's actually teaching younger kids. Expectations, thoughts about where do you think you can see this going, or anything really?
Yeah, I think, well, I think we might be discussing what's appropriate and inappropriate at certain ages.
Yes, I agree. So this episode might
This
be,
is kindergarten, right? Or
yeah,
something
we
like that.
might be less focused on teaching techniques as we did previously, and more focused on teaching appropriacy, graded teaching, the materials,
Professionalism.
professionalism, yeah, a whole
Mr.
bunch of
Garrison
that.
is the consummate professional.
Okay, so should we jump into our first clip?
Right.
Okay, children, who can tell me what a condom is?
Oh, so the thing about this I've just realized is that isn't this a bit of a hot topic in the US now? I've heard
Uh, y-
rumorings of this in the media.
yeah, I heard something about them talking about teaching how to do sexual things to really younger age kids. I don't know if
It's
this is
it's so
true or
it's a
valid, but
it's a politicized issue because it's a Republican talking point that this is going on, and the Democrats say it as a no, it's just LGBTQ education. That stuff doesn't happen. But then there seem to be extreme examples where weird stuff's happened. So yeah, kind of weird. In some ways, sometimes South Park can be weirdly prescient with things like that, can't they? But anyway, okay. So we got like how old are these kids? Five,
they're
six?
kindergarten. So this is that's in the UK would be reception, even
Five,
nursery.
4 years old.
Yeah,
Four and
yeah,
five.
yeah, because
Okay.
school age is what, 5 or 6, depending on the kid's age. So
I
yeah,
love
they'll
I
be.
love the expression on this little girl's face. Perfect. It's just like, what? Oh god.
Yes, Jenny.
It flies around and it's endangered.
That's a condor, Jenny. Condor. Condoms are what we use to stop the spread of STDs. Yes, Fillmore.
Can we do finger paints?
No, we can't do finger paints. You kids want to get herpes, huh? How about a nice bucket of AIDS? Sound good? Now pay attention, all right? I'm going to show you the proper way to put on a condom. First of all, you remove the condom from its package. Then you find which way the condom rolls out. Put it in your mouth
Oh
and
dear God.
apply.
Oh.
I don't know what you even say to that.
That might be the worst example of teaching that we've ever seen. And that's saying something.
How, but okay, this might be an interesting point. How much of the blame can you put on the teacher, and how much of the blame could you put on the curriculum? You know what I mean? Like, okay, if he hadn't have put the condom in his mouth, and was like teaching how to put a condom on, like, not, well, I'm not going to say normally, but in a more, I don't even know how to word it, but in a way that, like the standard way, you could argue that it was just the case that this was just age appropriate, but it was not his decision. It was the schools or curriculum or education system. Just what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that we can probably speculate that Mr. Garrison is utilizing his creative freedom as a teacher to demonstrate the mouth-based application technique.
I love it. You can word this stuff so professional.
So therefore, I think we would have to give him some negative feedback post observation.
Would it be negative? Just like, would it even be negative? If you were to show the standard application as well, if you were to actually think of this as,
yeah, well, I think the thing is that we already understand that something has gone awry with the curriculum process, if that is actually on the curriculum, and therefore it becomes a bit of a gray area then, because it's like, well, we already think it's probably not a good idea to have this phallic object and demonstrating sexual protection application to an inappropriate age group, and that's probably already not good with the curriculum. But if that is on the curriculum, and then someone uses their teaching creativity to demonstrate an alternative application method, use an alternative oral application method, then you could first of all say that's now inappropriate, because you've crossed the line into you've crossed the line from functional application to something which could be perceived as a sexual act in and of itself. Or you could say that there's some sort of hygiene issue with the teacher putting their mouth on things in class.
That's true. It just occurred to me that this might be a good clip for promoting standardization. Like, imagine, like this was an English classroom, and you're like, well, you could say it this way, or you could use the pig Latin, ixnay on the ombre, or whatever, like a weird way of saying English, something in English, and then and be like, oh, well, that's just an alternative way, but then not kind of stick to the standard way. So I don't know where I'm going with that point, but yeah,
I totally agree. But obviously, the issue is the sexual nature of the thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's where it becomes. If it was something else, then it would be fine to use your alternative.
That's true.
And the putting in the mouth is kind of weird as well. I mean, there might be circumstances where, I don't know. I mean, sometimes we eat in class, some student brings cakes in and people will eat. So obviously people put things in their mouth in class, but yeah, the combination of issues makes it a bit weird. But just demonstrating something in your own creative way is obviously, I think that's defensible.
Right.
I mean,
So
I think it should be
is,
permitted as well. I hate it when the institution prescribes everything. That's ridiculous.
yeah. No, I
So
agree. I
obviously
think you've absolutely nailed it here.
no, but I can see where you're going, Neil. You're trying to kind of tease apart where do we allow teachers to be creative and where do we draw the line at teaching kindergarten kids how to put on a condom with their mouth.
So sexual acts
There must
and
be a line
hygiene
here.
based.
Just can't see where it is though. Creative freedom. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's good that we've explicitly said that. Because I think that there probably are more Neils out there in the world that be like, but is it really that bad? At what point do they have to learn? And
But not only
should
that,
it be more functional. I bet there's people behind the doors that are doing this. That are going, all right, what is the appropriate level? And like, when we teach this, should we not also teach the how to do something in a more pleasurable way rather than just a stand way?
Exactly. And that rabbit hole that you're going down is the rabbit hole. I mean, that I was just about to say that 100%, maybe not quite like in the style of Mr. Garrison, but 100%, that there are cases in the real world where this has definitely happened to people, and probably even innocently. I mean, like a teacher has ran with their creative freedom and then suddenly like looked at it again and been like, oh, that was wildly inappropriate. And I was just trying to be, I was just trying to do something a bit off the wall. So,
It just gets away from you.
Definitely it's not always black and white. In this situation, it looks pretty black and white, but there are nuances to the teacher expressing some kind of creative freedom in how to present material. And when we get to inappropriacies, definitely. I mean, you have to dance that line all the time, really, especially as a community of language teacher, where we're constantly talking about having this person-to-person relationship with the students. But at the end of the day, still, I shouldn't have the same relationship with them as I have with you, for example. That, because we might talk about personal things or joke about things that could be really inappropriate in the classroom. So, there is obviously a line to dance, which can probably get a little bit more gray on issues that are a bit more subtle than this one.
Yeah. But speaking of inappropriate, should we check out the next?
I'm excited.
Okay, children, now I want to review the different sexual positions. Who can tell me which sexual positions we talked about?
Missionary position.
Missionary position, good. A little boring, but tried and true. What else?
Doggy.
That's right, doggy style we went over.
Pile driver.
Pile driver position, good, Quake.
The filthy Sanchez.
Yes, good, Flora. You remember the filthy Sanchez.
Hot Carl.
Yes, you can give your partner the old hot Carl, sure.
I think that was probably the most modest way that they could show it. I would have hated to have seen the clip of, because that there would have been demonstrations when he's going over the new vocabulary, right?
Yeah, I feel like we're missing something there, actually. Just let me see if I can. There might be an extra. I think that's where the episode ends. That's why it cut off.
Right.
So it's kind of the butt of a joke at the end of an episode. So we're probably missing a bit of context there. But related to reviewing this material, yeah, I think that in this case we can say that the inappropriacies have happened at a previous moment. Obviously, if, for example, you came into a classroom and you were told that you had to review something that someone had done previously and the things that they taught had been inappropriate, then what would you do in that situation? Do you refuse to review, or do you do what Mr. Garrison does, where you review even though it's inappropriate? I think you probably refuse to review, actually. I mean, in my circumstance, definitely. To be honest, this gets onto an issue which is kind of core to what I think about as a person and also as a teacher, which is that when you see something that you perceive as not being right, then you have to speak up and stand up for what you think in that situation. But this is actually why it kind of grinds my gears a bit when people go too much with the ideas around them, or the opinion of the crowd, or the opinion of the institution. And also you have that whole thing of the white coat syndrome, where people will do what the men in the white coats tell them. For example, with the experiment where you're shocking someone and the guy in the white coat keeps telling you to shock them.
Yeah.
And I've all throughout my life, I've kind of tried to make myself go against that grain, and more often than not, that ends up getting me in trouble. But in a situation like this, where someone tells me to do something that I think isn't right, then I just won't do it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell them I don't want to do this. So it puts me in good stead when things like this might happen.
Yeah, but fortunately you're not in a world where they try to force you to teach sexual positions and applications to young children. But I agree.
Things do happen, though. I mean, it's not quite as explicit as this, but things do happen. I mean, on a completely different level, for example, let me talk about the IELTS courses at a popular institution I worked at about 4 years ago, which this was an institution of very experienced teachers. And most of the time, the teachers were given a lot of creative freedom to make stuff. But with this particular IELTS course, it was sold in a certain way, and they prescribed the material on protected PowerPoint sheets that you couldn't edit, because they protected the sheet specifically, and they said, do not edit this, use the sheet as is, this is your class, the PowerPoint presentation. And I just didn't do it. I just changed the whole thing, because I'm just like, no, I'm not going to go through your crappy PowerPoint to these teenagers. They don't want to do it. It's not helpful to them. I don't give a shit if that's how you've sold the course. I'm not going to do it. And I didn't rub it in anyone's face. I just didn't do it.
Yeah.
There's no, you don't need to shine a spotlight on yourself. You just stick to your principles and go, no, I'm going to teach them, and we're going to have some fun, and they're going to learn stuff, rather than going through, what the hell is the point of having an experienced teacher if you're going to say you've got to go through this stupid PowerPoint?
Yeah, but you're obviously a very experienced, knowledgeable teacher that doesn't need that. But there's always the counter, isn't there? There's always the teacher that's like thinks that they know best, and maybe they don't. They're just like, well, I don't want to teach this because I think it's boring. And they do something that's more akin to them, but their idea of something boring is idea of fun is to make it, all about StarCraft, and it's a class full of, like, I don't know, sporty kids that have no idea about StarCraft or whatever. Like they're just not very, cognizant of themselves or appropriate. But I suppose you wouldn't actually, if you got to that point of being a teacher, that you wouldn't be like that.
No, I know what you're saying, Neil. But if you're going to the realm of experience and inexperienced, then you just accept that mistakes will happen.
Yeah. And
along the way, you're going to do things which don't work, which bomb. And we've already spoke about that it happens to everyone. It happens after 15 years. I can still walk into a classroom with an idea I think is great, and it just goes down like a block of concrete in the River Thames. And when you're an inexperienced teacher, that's more likely to happen. And also, you're more likely to be bullied into doing stuff by your institution as well. Like, if I go back to the first teaching job that I had, when I wasn't really sure about what to do, then when they told me to do stuff, then, I did tend to do it. So they would say, make sure you stick to the book. So I stuck to the book. You know, don't know any better then. You can only you can only be a rebel if you actually have if you actually know what to do that's better. There's no point in just randomly rebelling against it. Oh, I'm just not going to do it because you told me to do it. It's more like you have to have some self-belief that it's more worthwhile
you
than
can't
what
just
you're being
be
told.
the person that just is like a just what would you call it, a contrarian for just being the contrarian's sake. Just, you know, like whatever the other person says, you're just no, I'm exactly the opposite. I think one thing that we could talk about from this is, you know, like how do we as like English language teachers deal with, you know, this the sexual stuff, because, you know, with communicative language teaching, the focus is on, you know, it being functional and being communicative, and it's a huge aspect, especially, you know, like when you're dating. But I was also thinking on like a broader level, on just kind of understanding because it's weaved into society and media, and, you know, if someone that's, you know, a non-native English speaker, you know, especially goes to a native English speaking country, you know, they might just be, it might just be going over their heads in the same way, you know, like that, you know, 8-year-old girls were dancing to Christina Aguilera's Dirty without, you know, like just thinking, oh, I'm just doing the same dance, you know, what's you know, like what's wrong with this? Well, it's not there's anything wrong with it, but, you know, what's kind of like inappropriate about this, you know, like it's, or, you know, like listening to certain, you know, rap songs or something like a Doja Cat or what have you, where it's like, is this appropriate? I mean, it's great for, you know, doing the dance and stuff like that, but is that appropriate for certain ages? And, you know, should this also, how do you deal with teaching that? Because it feels like there's especially with the English language teaching, there's a whole area, a huge area of lexi, let's say, that's hardly ever touched upon. You know, how have you kind of encountered that, and have you any thoughts around it?
I think there's a lot of issues that you've brought up there, actually, which is both interesting and
like
surprising,
well,
given how we started. So I think that I got lost on the first point that you made, but after that you spoke about how, you know, with language teaching you touch on everything.
Yes, you really do.
In a way.
But you kind of have to, because language touches on everything.
Language touches on everything. And there's a few things which come to my mind about this. One is, during my applied linguistics, there was a lovely girl from Greece who worked with me on a few projects, who was studying alongside me in the masters. And she had a genuine and very naive interest in offensive words. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to have a look at kind of offensive words in the language and discover kind of how they changed and things like that. And she hadn't heard actually of the N word in English before. She just hadn't come across it. Really? And I spoke to it about her, and she's like, what? And I like spelled it out to her, and then she said it, and I kind of cringed when she said it. And she was really shocked by my response, like just genuinely and naively. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of like, it's really taboo to even say it now, blah, blah, blah. And she went and spoke to the course director about it. And the course director had like a similar response and kind of said, oh, you have to be very careful with how you deal with that. And she like lent her a book off her shelf that was called The N Word, was the book.
Really?
And yeah. And like let the whole fucking book, right? And lent her it. And she come back to me and she was more confused than ever, you know, and she was saying, we're supposed to be linguists and we can't even say the word. We can't write it down. We can't say it. Like, I'm talking about studying it and people are like, oh, you've got to tread carefully. She's like, what is this? We're just supposed to be linguists.
Yeah.
Like, why are people so sensitive about this? So, you know, she had a very linguist perspective, and that kind of goes into it's separating the social from the language. That's the thing. And that's what she was doing. Whereas, I mean, whether you should do that in an academic context or not, that's a discussion for another day and another time and maybe another expert. But when it comes to the classroom, it's very difficult to separate the social and the language. So if we just come into a classroom one day and I say, okay, everybody, today we're going to do swear words in English. Right. Fuck, shit, piss, bastard. You know, I mean, just to do that in like a blunt, like, here is the information way would actually be really difficult. Maybe not so much for the students, especially if they're low-level students, because they'll probably not even know those words. I mean, it's that kind of weird thing that as someone who speaks a language as a second language, you kind of have a slightly different reaction to swear words. So they don't trigger the same thing in you. And actually, they've done experiments on this, and it's true.
Yeah.
You know, so this is why, for example, when someone uses swear words in another language, it doesn't quite seem right. It almost seems like too crass. It almost seems like even more vulgar to other people, but not to them.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, maybe not to the students, but certainly for the teacher, if you were just writing those words on the board and saying them, you'd feel really weird about it. And it's almost impossible to separate that.
Yeah. It's a strange situation because it's one of those that actually brings to the front that, you know, words are just words. They're just kind of like, for many instances, they're just labels, and it's just that we imbue them with emotion and meaning and context. And, you know, is that swear words often are the most, where that becomes most apparent. And, you know, if you start thinking about it and going down that rabbit hole, you're like, what do words mean anyway? If I don't feel the same way about this word that other people say, and you're like, wow, my reality is a different type. And you're like, oh, geez, your brain can start to melt. But yeah, it's. You also have the with the society stuff if you do, it is weird if you are just teaching them in a swear words or any kind of like sexual words in a clinical way. It's kind of like you can't do it in a clinical way because you do need that society aspect to inform the words. You know, even you could do a whole class on the usage of the word fuck, and you would need to kind of integrate that in with society to give a better context to that, to say, look, even if you're just kind of using fucking various different ways, but also to inform that, you know, like, if someone swears more, if they use that word more often that shows to others that this person tends to be from a lower eco-social economic background, for example. So, you know, like, there's a whole bunch of caveats to it, and yeah, it's luckily I've not really had to teach anything, or I don't think I've ever had to, but, you know, the instances where students have asked, you know, I've been able to kind of more or less navigate it without too much trouble. But
yeah, we just avoid it, don't we?
Yeah,
and
generally.
It's I think it shows just how well students can sort of teach themselves over time, because
Funnily,
people do.
it's often the first words that they learn.
Yeah, people look it up in the dictionary, don't they? But, you know, competent speakers will tend to eventually be quite good at it. But again, I think it's something that's quite difficult to master because of the subtleties involved in it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things, the context, the way you use it, the intonation, even the subtle intonation of how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
So 100%,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
And
things
even,
going on there.
going to the UK I think it's even worse, because there's lots of ways to insult people, or be insulted, but not, not be sworn at, like, kind of talking about people as, oh, that window licker, or, like, he's a right plank or something. You know what I mean? They're not swear words, but it's derogatory if you really start to think about it. So I always wondered about doing a class like that, of kind of just kind of exploring the more colorful kind of ways that we swear, not swear.
Yeah, I I think you could dive into nuances like that with a lot of language, actually, and it's just the fact that swearing is so emotionally charged, particularly for the native, that make it kind of different in that way. As for what you were saying about doing a class on it, I think anything that's interesting can make a good class. So then when you're doing classes about language points themselves, they can be fun when they're interesting. It's like I've had a bit of a U-turn on this when it comes to idioms, whereas I used to in the past refrain from focusing on idioms because I thought they're just not that useful. And if students do use them, they tend to overuse them. So why the hell are we going to do idioms? They're so specific and students overuse them. Then why do them? Whereas now I've kind of U-turned on that. Whereas I think like, idioms, actually, they're kind of fun and interesting. And the point of a class on idioms is not necessarily to learn the idioms, as weird as that sounds.
Mm-hmm.
It's about all of the discussion that goes on around it.
Yeah.
I know that when there's an interesting class, then we're going to learn interesting language anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the interesting kind of ways that teaching's gone for me. So doing a class on ways of insulting people using day-to-day words could actually be really kind of fun and interesting if you did it in the right way. And it wouldn't necessarily be about the students like going out of class and all calling each other a plank, which they might do. And that's kind of fun anyway, because plank's kind of a fun insult, isn't it, most of the time? But it would be like the language
creating some assassins, really, if you think about it, because they could always just go, oh, sorry, my English is not so great. I mean, I didn't mean plank.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, like a beautiful like a tree? I don't
know. Yeah, right. But it's all about the communication and the negotiation of that topic. So just like doing a class on the future of space travel could be interesting. It could also be interesting to do a class on how regular words become insults.
Yeah,
because it's an interesting topic.
The times just thinking, I think the times that I feel like it's appropriate to kind of address, these words or, stuff that's a bit more taboo is it to do it when it emerges, or when you are tackling with language that can be skewed in that way. So, I think it really kind of needs to be rest on the shoulders of the teacher to say if it's needed or if it's appropriate on a particular level. Like if you were saying, so, oh, it's hot, you're exploring that word, depending on the context. Like say you're saying, oh, you're at the beach, it's hot, oh, but be careful not to say like I'm hot, or be aware if you say I'm hot, it could also mean, like you're kind of gloating about your sexual attractiveness or something like that. Like kind of maybe you kind of sprinkle it in there a little bit, That seems to be the way that I've used it in the past. And I think, I've been myself I try to navigate that, and depending on the class that I have. But I think I would like to see a little more of it, just because I think of instances where I've used Spanish and then like been totally embarrassed, like telling my boss that I'm what did I say, estoy caliente or something, like I can't remember, or instead of hace calor, and it just, although that it's kind of funny, it's just a situation that kind of could have been squashed out, if I had a teacher that had just gone, by the way, be careful how you
It's
use
difficult
that.
though.
But,
It's difficult to.
How do you anticipate that?
It's difficult to predict all those landmines. I kind of think that they're just bound to happen, and the best thing actually is to just kind of get used to the fact that it's a possibility, and when it happens, just be like, oh, okay, I mean, I remember once when, because the thing is as well, if you're with a charitable listener, then it should be fine. They'll kind of realize and shrug it off, and it'll be all right. It'll be like, oh, by the way, you just said you have 26 anuses, not that you're 26 years old or whatever, and it can be fun. But one of the things I found, and maybe it was to do with the area of Spain where we were, is that it was quite easy to find people who weren't very charitable, and that made actually learning the language quite difficult with those things. So I remember one time that you kind of quite proudly said something to someone, and it was quite a nice thing that you said, oh, you were just introducing your friend, and you said like esto es, and then her name. And she was like, esto? What, like I'm a thing? No, it's esta, and it's like, that seemed to me to be an excessive response, for something that was obviously an honest mistake. And so I mean, a lot of it is kind of how the people you're speaking to treat it. And I think as a non-native speaker, you have to realize you're going to get people who are more charitable and people who are less charitable. And you have to deal with that as well. It's just one of the things of being a non-native speaker. I think actually English learners are lucky in that English speakers tend to be more charitable, because there's so many non-native English speakers now that if you were a non-charitable listener, you'd be expending so much energy on kind of, what, you didn't use the possessive correctly, or you dropped your article, or you used the wrong preposition. Can you imagine if you were spending all of your time correcting all of the non-natives that you spoke to, or reacting negatively to what they were saying? Like, you'd be exhausted by the end of the day. So English natives actually are in the position where they kind of naturally gravitate towards being charitable listeners because of the wide array of accents and styles of speaking English which they're exposed to. And actually, in my experience, what I've noticed is that non-native speakers are more critical of errors in English than natives are. You see them correcting each other. Don't say this, say this. Don't say this, say this. And it's like, you don't have to be like that, because, if people, this is where you come to the grand conclusion that communication is the main purpose. But in other languages, definitely, I found Valencians in particular were quite harsh about certain errors in Spanish, which could really be written off as, it's just a bit of fun. Okay, ha, ha, ha. Okay, I won't say that again,
Yeah, interesting. It's maybe less to do with language, more to do with the person or persons, and
which takes us full circle in a way. This was what I was saying at the start about the linguistics versus the social side. And it's like, well, you could just use the language and say, like, this is the language, these are the rules, this is how it works. But really, you need to combine that with the social side to it, especially in class. And it's like you say, it's about the person you're speaking to. I remember that Michelle Thomas had a thing about this, didn't he? Where his thing was like, always take your time, say it out the right way. And there's someone on one of his recordings on the Spanish, I think it's the Spanish advanced one, they say, oh, what if they, what if they get it, they don't want to wait, or, they interrupt me or whatever. And he says, look, if you're speaking to someone who's not prepared to be patient with you to communicate, then maybe you shouldn't be communicating with that person. If they're not prepared to kind of wait and be patient with you, then, maybe they're just not a good person to talk to.
And he's 100% correct. Love Michelle. So underrated.
Well, it's because he doesn't have the qualifications, isn't it? He's kind of he's a maverick who sort of made it to the top with celebrities and so on. And he hasn't got his PhD in linguistics though. So how can he be a great teacher? It's not thoroughly
tested. It's not like
right, pseudoscientific.
Yeah, it gets lumped into pseudoscience. It's frustrating, but that's why we have this channel, and that's why we have the Teaching Masters series, where we look at these people that might be considered pseudoscience
fuck the science
or whatever, but it works. And why does it work? And is that true? But is there anything we can take from that? So I highly recommend that you take out and check out that series. We do have a playlist for that. There's plenty on there. But what I really would like to hear from people out there is what your experiences with this, teaching taboo topics, taboo words in the class. How have you dealt with that? How have you dealt with materials that you might have found inappropriate? Do you have any thoughts about what we saw with Mr. Garrison and maybe the curriculum that he was given? Leave the comments below, send us an email, go to our website eltunderthecovers.com, and we've got all the contact details, contact form there, and you can let us know. But right now, Rich is going to take us home with his final thoughts about Mr. Garrison, the whole subjects and what we saw in the class, and what came from that discussion and those clips.
Yeah, I would probably say, regardless of the age of your students, if you are teaching condom application, don't use your mouth.
Unless, is there an unless?
To be honest, condom application in the classroom should only be done by a qualified professional. And actually, if I remember rightly, when they did sex ed at my school, it was someone who came in who did all that stuff. And that's probably the right way of doing it.
So if you are a qualified educator in that realm, please send us a message. We'd love to have you on the show and let us know how you navigate that and define the parameters of appropriate and how to deal with that in the class.
I like that way of putting it. Yeah, define the parameters of what is appropriate.
I learned from you. Thank you very much, and see you again. If you're looking for more information from myself, you can go to teamteacherchina.com. We've got a whole bunch of materials, PowerPoints that you can use instantly in the classroom. We've got Team Teacher China YouTube channel where we have videos teaching you how to use those materials. Team Teacher English, where we put those materials into a video form for self-study. And Team Teacher Baby, where I take my experience as a teacher and put that into parenting.
And go to youtube.com/Professor Rich to see some English teaching. You can catch me weekly live streams on Oxford Online English YouTube channel. Oh, and also you can do a YouTube search for POG Space UK, and you would get my alpha version of my new gaming channel, which actually just have some trial content on there at the moment. You can email us here at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the show.
Smash that like button, share and subscribe.
And watch 100% of the video and don't click off. Thank you.
Bye.